not called to be a friend of God. We're called to be his bride. And that's such an honor. And it always, and I know I'm not the only one here, it always, when the spring holy days start coming and our renewing of our vows, so to speak, with the Passover comes up, I do a lot of self-examination, and rightly so. I've been thinking, the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with or ever will have to deal with is betrayal. It hurts more than the meanest, nastiest words from somebody I don't even know. And they don't even have to be a gruesome betrayal, just a simple betrayal. But this is how much he loves us, that when we see it, we're not going to go there for the sake of time, but in Hosea, the whole chapter, all the books, but mainly the one that stuck out to my mind was the end of chapter 2. First part of chapter 2 talks about how his bride, his people, the children of Israel, were being unfaithful to him, were serving other gods. They were betraying him, the one that called him out, the one that protected him, the one that made sure they had shade in the daytime, the very one that made sure they had a light to lead them by night. He made sure that they had meals. If they just simply obeyed him, they had everything that they could ever have. That he gave them a promised land, flowing with just all the niceties, flowing with milk and honey. And constantly they betrayed him. All but a select few, just a minority of the group. But he loved them so much that even with that betrayal, he still sought for them to be brought back to him, be united with him. I think of Paul. He told, I don't remember which church, he sat there and said, I've presented you to Christ, a chaste and pure virgin. Remain so. In Revelations chapter 2, one of the churches, and it's key, we can start on the right track, and without ulterior motives, we can find ourselves giving something, and it doesn't have to mean we're serving Hindu or Buddha or whatever else. If we're not willing to cherish him to the point that when we wake up, that's the first thing on our mind, is to spend a little time with him, however much time we can. If he doesn't mean enough that throughout the day our mind won't think upon him, then we have placed something else before him. We're being unfaithful, no matter how little it is. But he doesn't just condemn us when he sees that. We see several examples in this church of marriage that are honorable. And we know that when the other is not around, it bothers them. When one's sick and the other one's here, they can't wait to go make sure they're fine. And that's the way it should be, rightly so. You've become so dependent on each other, just as we are to be with Christ, that when there's a separation, for whatever the reason, we want to make sure everything's cool, the person's fine, can't wait to be back in their company. We shouldn't have, whether it be a job, making money, hanging out with buddies, even the good things that we do. And it could be godly things we're doing. We shouldn't allow them to jump before us and the Lord, our private time with the Lord. The only way we're going to be faithful in the war and not stumble and be destroyed is if we spend that one-on-one time with him. We know him intimately. We're not going to be deceived by the Antichrist. We're not going to be deceived by lying and seducing spirits. If you know him inside and out, no one can come say, well, this is what God is. Because we know that's not his character. That's not him. Revelations 2, verse 1. To the angel of the church of Ephesus write, the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who walks among the 7 golden lampstands, says this, I know your deeds and your toil and your perseverance, that you cannot endure evil men, and you put to the test those who call themselves apostles, and they are not, and you found them to be false. And you have perseverance and have endured for my name's sake and have not grown weary. All those things are good things. He's admonishing them that I know your deeds. You're honorable. Verse 4 says, but I have this against you. You've left your first love. Other things have gotten in the way of our relationship. Your own personal time, whatever it is. And I'm guilty too. That's why I've been self-examining myself to make sure, does he matter enough for me to put all that other on the back burner and put him first? I don't want to enter into the covenant, the renewal of our covenant, and me be lacking. It's not a matter of looking, oh, well, so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that. It should be you looking at yourself saying, and using the word and Jesus as a reference, am I lining up? I want to be pure before him. He deserves nothing less than a pure virgin. One that's not being tossed to and fro. One that would rather spend time doing other things. Revelations 12. It matters to him. Even to the point of the children of Israel, when Jesus was walking, he was reaching them out to them first, the natural seed. And at the end, he's standing on the temple, up on the mount, looking down over Jerusalem. He said, how long have I wanted to just embrace you? How long have I wanted to gather you to myself? You refused. How painful would that be? This is the one that thought it not a thing to be selfishly hung on to be equal with God. This is the very one that created everything. Formed man out of his own hands, breathed his breath into us, made us in his image for a purpose, to be called and chosen in him. Just as in Genesis we see Eve was brought out of Adam, used the rib. The rib, of course, we know protects the most vital organs of the person. Protects the life force, the heart, the lungs, all the organs. Without them, we will die. And he took us out of the sight of Christ. He found us in him before the foundation of the world. Even if we find ourselves, and don't be condemned, if we find ourselves that we have put something else first, we haven't been faithful like we need to be. He is loving. Because the end of chapter 2 of Hosea there talks about how he's going to repent of his judgment, and he's going to draw her to himself, and he's going to cherish her, and he's going to beautify her. Now, I can't even imagine. I know the simple betrayals I've had in my life, how painful it was, and how hard it was to forgive that. How much more so if I had a spouse that, for some reason, or even so if it was me, and I had a spouse, for some reason I found her not worthy of my loyalty. How that I don't know how he could forgive it. I don't know if I could. Rightly so, in him I should. But he did enough that he washed it clean. Just as we see there when Joshua was standing before, and the accuser of the brethren came before him and said, he's filthy, he's violated himself, he's impure. And he said, you shut up, and y'all strip that cleansing, put robes on him. That's who he is. Now you keep your mouth shut. It angered the Lord. If we are amiss, if we are dirty, we can be purified. But we have to seek him. We have to write what we're spending our time doing. We have to do, it's not going to be him doing everything for us. We have to make the choice. 12. Revelations 12, verse 1. His church. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and her head had a crown of 12 stars. That's his description of his bride. That's his description of us, the church. And we know that this one body is not his full church, but that is what we're to be. Pure, clothed in glory, Christ's righteousness on us. Revelations, last scripture, 21. There's no other time. I mean, we all enjoy the Feast of Tabernacles. We all enjoy all the feasts, but By far, Feast of Tabernacles is one thing we always look forward to. But I know personally with this congregation, the most cherished of all the feasts is the unleavened bread, because that's our feast. That's our rededication to the Lord. That's Him saying, you're pure in me. You're mine. How precious is that? I used to marvel at where He used to walk in the cool of the day with Adam, as was the custom, and Eve. He made that appointment to, not in the hardest part, most miserable part of the day, but whenever it's beautiful outside. And we see spring weather. Some days it's just gorgeous, absolutely perfect weather. And He set that time appointed of all the things He had to keep in order to spend time with us. Just the fellowship. I know just fellowshipping with my brothers and sisters here means the world and all to me when we can just sit in fellowship. It don't matter what we're doing, because we're always trying to be faithful and not doing anything that we shouldn't be doing, and safeguarding each other. But to know that not only once a week, like today, He set apart an appointment, but at certain annual feast times, the harvest of souls. Verses starting in verse 10, chapter 21, verse 10. He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Her brilliance was like very costly stone, a stone of crystal clear jasper. You remember where Christ said, I'm going to prepare a place for you? This is the place He's preparing for us. This is the bride chamber. And Hebrew custom, whenever you would be betrothed, it could be a year, 2 years, whatever. The man would go off and build a attachment onto his family's house, a room, a living quarters for his bride. And she never knew usually when he was going to be finished with it, because it depends on how much, he had to spend on it, and how much he dolled it up and dressed it up and how big it was would determine how long it took him to build it. But it also showed trust in her, that she stayed pure and faithful that whole time while the bride chamber was being dressed. We see the parable of the 10 virgins. That's what was going on. He was preparing a bride chamber for his bride. There was 10 of them. 5 of them were prepared, 5 of them weren't, but all of them were sleeping. When He came, the herald came, He's coming. Everybody stirred to get ready. Well, it's not very faithful if you wait till the last minute to go get things you need. As we see, they did so. He came and He already left. By the time they found Him, the door was already shut and He wouldn't let them in. Be ready at the moment's notice. We don't know. We know the time period He's coming. We can see the signs, and we know right now they're not there completely yet. But we don't know what day He's showing up. It's our obligation. We should desire to be ready at that moment, perfectly ready. That means we got to be dutiful here. I know Michael's told us a lot of times, if you practice to fail, you're going to fail. If you practice not to give up, if you practice to be faithful, if you practice to be loyal and have all the godly attributes, that's what you're going to do. When the fire turns up, the heat turns up, you're dunked into the fire, you're going to exhibit those characters, not the characters of, you blow up and act like a fool. If you blow up and act like a fool, that means you've been practicing the wrong things. You've got the neural pathways for the wrong kind of spirit. We can change that. Verse 12 says, it had a great and high wall with 12 gates. At the gates, 12 angels, the names were written on them, which are those of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. And he goes on through the description. It is, our minds can't grasp it. I think of the song Golden City. And that's just a taste of what our minds can comprehend, what He's building for us. And the biggest thing to me is, after all this, after all the struggles, after all the times I've been unfaithful, stumbled, got married, He's willing to purify me if I'm just repentant, if I'm loyal and repentant. But after all he's already done, he's not finished yet. He's going to serve us at table. When we're in his likeness, he's going, and we picture that, of course, if you've been there at the Feast of Tabernacles as an example of it. To me, we should be doing something for him. That's what I feel, and I know I'm not the only one, but that's not the way he's going to have it. He's going to serve us again at table. He's going to just bless us beyond measure. So let us be purified. We're only a little over a week away from our renewal of our covenant. So let us painstakingly watch and be careful, because we don't want to take that lightly at all. Praise God.